Hey guys, good Saturday morning. Hope everybody is doing well. A little special morning edition of Tropical Tracks here as we talk about Ian, of course. We're gonna show you the latest advisory, and we're waiting on the 11 a.m. advisory, which the second it comes in, we will pop it up here, and you'll probably see it before any TV station can get it on TV. So it's funny because I did TV for 37 years, and two things. One, I get more nervous now talking to you guys because it lives on the internet forever, right? And then also, I don't have to shave anymore, but I will before the afternoon broadcast. So let's get right into it and talk about what's going on this morning. So one thing, and I'll show you here on the satellite in just a second, but a lot of people, meteorologists, non-meteorologists, are just looking for information, and you're looking for any hints here or there that says, oh, it's going to do this, or oh, it might do that. I always kind of just throw this into the soup here and kind of taste it every now and then and go, yeah, that ingredient may be changing what we're doing here. But in the big scheme of things, we kind of don't really know how these little wobbles and changes and drifts and things like that play into the big downstream kind of implications for Florida and the Gulf of Mexico. It's really way too early. The uncertainty is so high. In fact, I think I said this yesterday or the day before. This is about as high as I've seen it in recent times for a tropical system, where we don't have somebody says something wrong with the audio. Hopefully you guys can hear me. Okay for me. Okay, I will move on then. So we don't have a lot of confidence in what the models are doing. And I really feel for the folks at the Hurricane Center because I've got friends there, and in situations like this in the past, I'd say, well, what do you think in 5 days? And my friend said, I don't know. That being said, they are the best at what they do, and they must make a forecast. So they make their forecast with the information that they have and then put their forecast out. So you can't fault them. They are doing everything they can, and they have to put out a 5-day forecast. And if it shifts a lot, the 5-day point in the next 5 days, it's just what it is. It's kind of like you just go to press, you go to the internet, you put out your advisory with the best information you have. You can't just put a big question mark at the 5-day point. Nobody can live with that. And because our preparation takes time, unfortunately, we have to start preparing before we know for sure where it's going to go. It's just a fact of life. If you are going to live in Florida, you are going to have to live with the possibility that you are going to be preparing for something that may not hit. In fact, probably more often than not, it doesn't hit. But that's not a bad thing. That's just what we live with here. So this is, you know what, this is what we do here. I've been here for quite a while and been through a lot of these. Like I know many of you, and for those of you who are new, I know this is kind of a whole new thing. Hurricanes are unlike any other weather event. It's a marathon. It's not a sprint. You kind of make slow adjustments, just like the Hurricane Center makes slow adjustments with their forecast track and their cone. And so that's something that we'll do as we go forward here. So first off, this is the 8 a.m. intermediate advisory. Now, when there are watches and warnings in effect, hurricane, tropical storm, watches or warnings, the Hurricane Center issues an advisory every 3 hours. Every 6 hours, it's the full advisory. We call it the forecast advisory. It contains the new track. I said yesterday, it comes out at 5 p.m. right now in our time, 11 a.m. and 5 p.m., so every 6 hours. Unless there's a special advisory with a special track. Sometimes that happens if a storm deviates significantly outside of the current forecast track, or if the intensity forecast changes significantly. Then a new forecast advisory is issued. Otherwise, it's just a 3-hourly cycle here. So 11 a.m. we'll have the new forecast advisory. 2 p.m. we'll have the new intermediate advisory. 5 p.m. the new forecast advisory. 8 p.m. the intermediate advisory. And the intermediate advisory only updates kind of this information right here. It doesn't change the track forecast. That forecast doesn't change until the next advisory. Now, there's an exception to the intermediate advisory, and those are called tropical cyclone updates. And when a storm is within radar range of a radar site, I think it's just U.S. radar sites, the National Hurricane Center may issue hourly updates on the position. They used to call them position updates. Now I think it's just included in the tropical cyclone update, which also includes updates to watches and warnings and stuff like that. So if it's really close to the coast and it's a hurricane and they can track the eye, then we get hourly updates on the position. All right, so let's dig into this. I know as I'm talking on and on. I'm kind of stalling also, waiting for the new advisory for when it comes in. But let's move forward here and look at the track, and you can see there the forecast is for intensification. That is Sunday afternoon. The Cayman Islands are right here. The track has shifted a little bit to the west. That may be good news for Jamaica, where there is a tropical storm watch, hurricane watches for the Caymans right now. That is Sunday afternoon. In this yellow area here, that's where tropical storm conditions, at least in the first 3 days, are expected. When we get to the 4 and 5 day, it's kind of more just they're possible there because the track can shift. Here in the inside there, that's the possibility of hurricane conditions, and you can see it does include portions of the Caymans. And then there's the forecast intensity based on the 5 a.m. advisory was for Category 2 by Monday afternoon. And it's across western Cuba, and then based on the 5 a.m. advisory, a forecast to continue to intensify. Category 3 is the forecast there. That's the Tuesday night, Wednesday time frame. And as we go forward there, this, of course, getting everybody's attention on the West Coast, all the way up and down the coast, including the Panhandle. And I appreciate you folks in the Panhandle watching and commenting, because everybody should be watching this. Our preparation timeline is different in the Panhandle you're watching. In South Florida and on the West Coast, we are gradually making preparations, and I'll talk more about that in just a bit. Now, one thing that was pointed out here, and this is a really good point, is see how the red, this hurricane area, kind of drops off? This is because the model that produces those red colors there, those hurricane probabilities, it disperses as you get more into the 4 and 5 day time frame, and so you have fewer members going over one point. So it looks like the chances go down, but they don't. It's just it's so far out. There's a lot of dispersion of that model. That's going to be worked on and improved. It's being worked on and going to be improved for next hurricane season, so we're looking forward to that. All right, the current watches, there's the tropical storm watch for Jamaica, hurricane watches for the Cayman Islands there. Here was the Hurricane Hunter this morning out there. This was a NOAA plane leaving out of Aruba this morning. I believe a new one is has left Lakeland and it's going to intercept the storm and then fly on over to Aruba. That's going to be the staging point. You can see they're on a bit of a research mission as well, so they didn't make your typical your alpha pattern, which is like a figure 4 pattern or anything like that. But kind of what was kind of interesting, and let me show you over here on my other computer screen as well, because it's kind of a more detailed look at that. This was the output from the actual Hurricane Hunter here. And what you could see, and I'll draw on it here, is that even though they found a center here, the winds were pretty light down to the south and southwest. And they didn't investigate this area, but it wasn't really evident that there was a lot of strong westerly winds down here. Sometimes what happens is that causes a bit of, I call it propagation, because the center might be there, and then it might try to keep reforming a little bit to the southwest. What does that mean in the big term of things? It may have some implications for the overall advisory once it gets into the Gulf, because it may then take longer to make the turn to get into the Gulf, and talk about all of that coming up in just a second here. But there's also some pressure on it, and these are the low-level winds here. Let me show you this. So there's this little tiny high pressure area right here, and that is kind of pushing, trying to press in the lower levels Ian to the southwest. That's going to eventually end because one, that little high pressure area, that is kind of falling apart, and this bigger high pressure area, that is moving to the west. So it's going to eventually open up a path to go more to the northwest and north here. But right now that path doesn't exist, so we're seeing some of that southwest motion. So let me show you, also you can see kind of that going on there in the water vapor loop. This is the little high here. You can almost make out, the high pressure areas are harder to see, but you can almost make out a bit of that swirl there, and then that motion kind of pushing back to the southwest there. So those things are going on as well. In terms of the overall steering, now here's where all of this comes into play, and it's a lot of speculation at this point. It's just a lot of, well, what does that mean? And honestly, I have to say, I don't know for sure. We're watching it. These may play and have rolls down the road, but right now we're basically just watching it to see what happens here. But we'll talk about all these possible scenarios. So here's the pattern. We've got the blocking high over the southern U.S. There's the Fiona jet stream and dip that is lifting out of the Canadian Maritimes. And we also have a blocking high that's right now draped. You can see it basically draped from the central Atlantic back to the little high that's near Hispaniola and back to the bigger high back here in the west. So that's kind of keeping any pathways for Ian to go to the northwest. They're not really open right now. That's why we've got this west and west-southwest motion. As we go forward into time here we are into overnight tonight, and you can see there it begins to open up here. This blocking high is starting to retreat. There's a bit of an opening, a pathway north starting to develop. At this point, though, Ian most likely still moving most westerly. And then as we get into the Sunday night, Monday time frame, so this is 1 a.m. Monday morning, so just after midnight Sunday night, you can see a bigger opening starts to develop now. There's the western extent of that blocking high, and then the eastern extent of that blocking high is over there. So the blocking high to the east is closer, and it's going to start to nudge it to the north. Now the jet stream dip here, that is something that would tend to turn it or kind of curve it to the east. The question really is that how soon does Ian get up in here so that it can sense that dip? Does it get there in a hurry and sense the dip soon? If that happens, then it's more likely going to turn to the right. Does Ian go a little bit farther to the west and take its time and then make a turn when it senses the jet stream dip and then affect areas farther to the north? That's a possibility too. Does, and I'm going to advance here because here we are into the, say, early Tuesday morning time frame. The jet stream dip is about its farthest extent there. This, by the way, the background here we're looking at is the European. And you can see there's a little bit of a nudging from the block to the east. The block to the west continues to retreat. So there's a good opportunity to go to the north. So that is through Tuesday morning. There's Wednesday, and see the jet stream dip here, and the GFS solution was more pronounced on this. The jet stream dip is moving out. The European has been slower on that. The European had a piece of that left behind. Now you've got some influence from the blocking high here, but the blocking high to the west is trying to come back in. So all of a sudden the steering currents, Ian gets in this area where the steering currents are very light. And so a lot of it depends on, is Ian farther to the west and not sensing the jet stream dip at all? Is Ian farther to the north and sensing the jet stream dip and turning in? Was Ian quicker and farther to the north and got to the jet stream dip earlier? It's too early to tell, and all of this is evolving as well. And then we'll go a little bit farther into time here, and you can see now the jet stream dip is leaving. The blocking high is trying to reestablish itself. This blocking high is also pushing back in. And what's happening potentially over Florida and the Gulf of Mexico, if the jet stream dip gets out of here before Ian senses it, is very light steering currents, very light steering currents. And so then all of a sudden you've got a meandering storm under very light steering currents. Is that going to happen? I don't know, but that is starting to become a possibility. So when we think of very light steering currents, what are we thinking of there? I tried to find two examples here of what would very light steering currents look like. This first one, and I'm not saying this is going to happen, but this is what happens when you have very light steering currents. That is a hurricane called Easy. Back in the 50s, they had funny names. That was Hurricane Easy, and Easy got caught under these very light steering currents off the coast of Florida, meandered around, finally started to move to the east over Florida, and then got carried back to the northwest. So very light steering currents, they are a big, big problem. That's one of the scenarios there. This is from Elena, 1985. Look at that, very light steering currents. So what you have here is the storm was moving under steering currents that were carrying it to the west-northwest. It got into the Gulf here, and all of a sudden, whatever was steering it stopped. And I believe each one of these is every 6 hours. So you've gone 6, 12, 18, 24, 30, and then look at that. There's all those little dots right on top of each other. it basically wasn't moving. It was just stalled there, meandering around. And then eventually it appears, and I didn't look at the upper air data, a new high came in and then started moving it off to the northwest. Is that going to happen? Who knows? Who knows? And when it gets into this situation where it's kind of in this light steering current area, really nobody knows. And I mentioned this on Twitter as well, that if it gets under this light steering current area between high pressure systems, it's called a COL, C-O-L. If it gets trapped under this, we don't know where it's going, and there's just no really reasonable solutions until a new steering pattern takes over. So those are the things that we're going to be watching here, and as we're getting ready for the 11 o'clock advisory, 10:52 right now, let's talk a little bit about the tracks, because some of this is captured in the tracks as well. So this is the GFS ensemble. You can see it has trended a little bit to the west there, and our mean and our operational member, they are back there to the west, and there was the 5 a.m. Hurricane Center track. Now, the GFS has been kind of flipping and flopping back all over the place here, like, well, why trust it now? Well, I think the reason we're starting to trust it now a little bit is because the European model is now starting to follow the GFS model. And it's funny because, you never know which model is correct until it verifies, and the verification time here is still several days away. So we don't know which one's going to verify at this point in time. But you can see even the GFS contains these members here that tend to look like they miss the trough. These are the ones that more likely catch the trough up here over Florida. So this also plays out even more so in the European ensemble. So here's the European ensembles, and you can see once again we have this big spread. We have this group right here that seems to sense the trough because the European has been slower getting the trough out, and then we still have a few kind of members over here that stagger along to get on up there. So we'll see. I think, based on what we're seeing here, and some of the folks are saying, this is going to be a situation where we watch closely to see. I think the Hurricane Center is going to update their 11 o'clock advisory. Well, they will update their 11 o'clock advisory, obviously. And I try to never guess because, I mean, it's not just one specialist sitting at the desk. There's usually discussion. There's a good, these guys have been doing this for all of the Atlantic Basin and the Eastern Pacific. They do every single storm, so they've really got a good track record. I tend to kind of watch more of the coastal storms during hurricane season, especially in the Atlantic. So here it is. Here's our advisory. So let's go ahead and get to that. Here comes the crawl on the bottom of the screen, and it's updating on the graphic as well. So currently, Tropical Storm Ian, it's at 14.4, 75.2, moving to the west at 15. And usually the Hurricane Center will do like an average motion. So even though you can see on the line there, it looks a little bit to the southwest here recently. It's basically an average motion. I think sometimes you'll see, and let me just check on this computer over here. They'll give what we call like a compass direction, which if you use a compass okay, so they're showing, and I'll show you what I'm looking at here. No need to hide anything here. So they're it's kind of small here, but up in the advisory, when you look at the advisory, there's this one line here that says present motion, and it says it's moving 260. So you'll probably see it in the crawl at the bottom here. So 260 is not quite due west. It's just a little bit south of due west. So that's that motion in there, 270 miles southeast of Kingston. So this is the new advisory. Let's go through it together. I haven't seen it. I'm seeing it right with you. And like I always show here, and on this advisory here, in fact, let me do this because I'll show you the advisory and then we'll talk about timing issues because that is our timing graphic. And let me just show you the advisory graphic here. So you're seeing it with me. I show the yellow area here. That is the tropical storm conditions area, and you can see it extends well outside of the cone. This is my issue with the cone, and I'm not shy about it. The cone tracks where the center is expected to be, but that's a point. The cone tracks a point, and we're all talking about a storm which has a lot of size to it, and so I just feel that a better graphic would be something that kind of shows the size as well. but takes into account the center point, takes into account the tropical conditions as well, is based on the National Hurricane Center advisory. I don't want to ever get away from their advisory data. So there's the forecast track, and then here we are. The forecast is for Category 1 by Sunday evening, Category 2 by Sunday night, right there, closest approach to the Caymans, where I wouldn't be surprised if hurricane warnings don't get issued. Maybe they've already been issued. Let's see, Hurricane Watch, and so no changes, so Hurricane Watch still for the Caymans. And then as we go forward here, there's the forecast. So there is 8 p.m. on Monday, and then there is 8 a.m. on Tuesday. It looks like the closest approach to the Keys is Tuesday. Going forward here, there is 8 a.m. Wednesday, and then there is 8 a.m. Thursday there. And you can see the cone, or the track rather, has shifted a little bit to the west there. Before it was going right up over Tampa, it's shifted a little bit to the west there. It's 4 and 5 days out. We can't pay attention to exactly where that line is, exactly where that track is. Of course, we still have the watches down there because at this point we're more concerned about preparing and the effects. All right, so let's break down what I was about to tell you about here with the timing. So now this is tracking, and this only shows the extent of the tropical storm winds, and this is kind of our planning graphic here, because what we do is we want to make sure everything is done before the arrival of tropical storm force winds. So that's kind of our clock here. So we're at 11 p.m. Sunday, so the Caymans want to have their activities done before sunset Sunday, based on this advisory. This is the 11 a.m. advisory. Going forward here, Western Cuba, especially the Pinar del Rio province. This is 4 p.m. on Monday here, so clearly Sunday I think is a good time also to wrap up preparations because the weather will be going down on Monday. Going forward here, there's the closest approach, or at least the initial onset of possible tropical storm conditions in the lower Keys. That's 9 a.m. For Tuesday. So folks in the lower Keys want to have everything wrapped up by Monday night. And you'll notice here, this is so Tuesday evening, this is past sunset Tuesday evening, that the area of the tropical storm conditions has receded a bit from South Florida. So there we are here. We are not in that tropical storm condition area anymore based on this timing graphic. Obviously, we'll still watch. I'm still going to do my outdoor preps for strong winds and gusty squalls because we're going to be on the right side of this. But I'm also going to watch through Sunday's advisories if there are any more shifts back to the right. But from my point of view, for the Upper Keys, Miami-Dade, Broward, and Palm Beaches, I'm going to continue my preps at a steady pace, but I'm not planning, and I'm planning on continuing to watch, but I'm not necessarily planning on this is going to be something I might be continuing into Monday. Does that make sense? I don't think it does. So basically when we do our preps, we say, I will do this tomorrow if it's continuing to come our way tomorrow. What am I going to be doing tomorrow if it's going to be continuing to come our way? And things like that. So right now, it's kind of coming our way, so I'm going to continue my outdoor preps like that, and I'll show you that graphic in just a second. But more emphasis now seems to be shifting towards the west coast of Florida based on this advisory. So folks from Fort Myers all the way up the west coast, you want to have things done well before sunset on Tuesday. Sunset on Tuesday. And then there we are into the Wednesday morning time frame, and you can see tropical storm conditions working their way up the coast Tuesday night into Wednesday based on that advisory. And then as we go forward here, you can see the tropical storm conditions begin to decrease. But basically, I think everybody in North Florida should obviously keep their eyes on this as we go into that Wednesday, Thursday time frame. Folks in North Florida, you just have more time to watch as well as the Panhandle. Okay, so let's wrap it up here. What are we doing in terms of preparations? So this was based on the 5 a.m. advisory. I think it applies still to the 11 a.m. advisory. Miami-Dade, Broward, Palm Beach, Martin, St. Lucie counties. We're taking care of yard items. We're doing that this weekend. That could blow around. So any patio furniture that can blow around, anything like that. Umbrellas, whatever you have. anything, swinging chairs, anything like that can blow around. Take care of that this weekend. Biscayne Bay, as well as the Intracoastal and Broward boats, I'm thinking here, as well as the Middle and Upper Keys. You're taking care of your yard items as well, and also you're securing your boats, which means we're probably going to see a strong southerly wind on the side of Ian in the Eastern Gulf. So if my boat is exposed to a long southerly waves, I'm going to make big preps on that. Maybe extend my dock lines, things like that. In terms of other boats, I always say remove windage, and windage is anything that catches the wind because then your boat kind of wants to pull against the dock line, so you want to avoid that. Especially from south of Marathon, so basically the lower Keys, everywhere from Pine Island, Big Pine, to all the way down to Key West. You're also at this point reviewing your evacuation plan because it wouldn't take much of a shift back to the right to bring in storm surge flooding, possibly significant storm surge flooding. So you want to keep up to date with every single advisory, especially in the lower Keys in terms of evacuations, and of course check with Monroe County down there. So this also applies to the west coast here, basically from about Naples all the way down to Everglades City and Flamingo. The storm surge threat exists, and you don't even have to have a storm close along the Florida west coast because it has a gentle slope that goes into the Gulf. So same things, secure your boats, take care of things that would blow around, and review your evacuation plan if you're in an evacuation area. Now, more up to the north, say Port Charlotte, including Fort Myers, on up through Sarasota, as well as Pinellas County and Hillsborough County, and then on up through Cedar Key. So we're all the way up to Levy County, as well as Citrus, Hernando, Pasco, Manatee, Sarasota, Venice on the coast, all the way up to Anna Maria Island, Clearwater, as well as St. Petersburg. You need to be checking your hurricane supplies, reviewing your evacuation plan if you're in storm surge areas, and basically I think all of Florida up the peninsula needs to be prepared for power outages because while you may not see the worst of Ian, trees come down on power lines and you get power outages, and that's always a possibility. So I think once again, and based on this new advisory, it doesn't really change. We're checking our hurricane kits, taking care of yard items that could blow around, securing boats, reviewing our evacuation plan with the anticipation that if tomorrow this is still coming towards west central and central Florida, then you might have to do more than just these preparation plans. But remember, we're on a timeline here, so we're not getting everything done at once. We're going step by step by step by step. And I know a lot of folks buying generators. I'm getting good reports from everybody. I really appreciate the reports. I can't stress enough, if you buy a generator, buy a carbon monoxide detector. History shows that post-storm fatalities mostly are from two things: carbon monoxide poisoning and heart attacks, because people overexert themselves cleaning up. So after the storm, you have to be super, super careful. And finally, for all my friends in the Panhandle, we're still at a time-wise situation where we're checking our hurricane kits and watching closely, but I think it's still too early to go into big scale preparations here. This is, you folks get an opportunity to kind of watch there. So that's basically it for what's going on right now. Let me put up we'll put up a satellite loop here and show you the hurricane hunters once again with what they're doing there. And so a quick question here on the chat: storm landing south or north of Tampa Bay. So it's really too early to tell. Obviously, what eventually happens, if it happens, if the storm comes in south of Tampa Bay, then we see where Tampa Bay is on the north and northwest side of the storm. And as we saw in Irma, at least initially, but Irma's wind field was enormous. We saw the drawdown of the bay where the water went out. Obviously, if it comes in north of the bay, then it's a huge storm surge issue. Last year or 2 years ago in Ada, we saw storm surge flooding, especially in Pinellas County, Madeira Beach, lots of areas there along the, it's not A1A, it's whatever is right along the coast there. I can't think of it right now. But it's the road, the main road that goes north-south through Pinellas County, on Madeira Beach, all the way down to St. Pete Beach. And I know somebody's going to jump in the chat and say, the name of that road is US 19, alternate US 19, that's what it is, right? So basically, back to what I was saying is, if it goes in north of the bay, there could be storm surge flooding. Ada, which wasn't a terribly strong storm, created a lot of storm surge flooding. Also, we had Elsa last year, which created storm surge flooding. It was barely a hurricane, as well as Bayshore in Tampa Bay proper. Of course, we always get flooding there. So another question here, will Dade, Broward, Palm Beach get tropical storm conditions? It's going to be a close call. You know, we could see, based on what we're seeing right now in this advisory, we could see tropical storm wind gusts. Sometimes it doesn't have to be sustained 40-mile-an-hour winds. It's a gust in a squall to 60 that can do damage. So we're kind of watching here. That's why we're taking care of things on the outside that could blow around from near tropical storm conditions. If in subsequent advisories the track comes back to the east some, then later on Sunday and Monday, of course after the Dolphins game, then we kind of up our preparations a little bit. Fins up, by the way. Rain amounts for Broward. So good questions there. So this is not a terribly large storm, and it also right now doesn't have a great big moisture tail coming into it. So we can be thankful for that. That being said, two things to consider here. We're going to be on the right side of the storm, Florida, so we could see significant rainfall. And if the storm slows down, that would be really, really bad, because then we could be stuck in persistent rainfall, and that basically applies up and down the peninsula. So, of course, multitude of hazards along the coast, the storm surge possibility, the wind possibility, the tornado possibility on the east or right side of this system, and then the flood possibility, all hazards that we have to deal with here. So as we get closer, I'll try to dial in on how much rain potential, where the heaviest rain could fall. Sometimes you don't know until we look at the radar and see it all set up, stuff like that. So that's basically our update for today. Appreciate everybody tuning in. Let me, of course, do my, gotta do this. I'm so new to YouTube that if you like the video, please click like, subscribe, and get notifications. And then when I do my next live, you will get a quick update on that. That's basically all for right now. I'll be back today at 4:30, and we'll go over everything again and talk about the 5 o'clock advisory on Ian.